So, so here's the thing. This morning, I had a great idea, and I thought, well, I won't wear my shoes because it's raining, and my shoes are leather. I don't want them to get wet. So I go barefoot, and I know it's slippery on the road. So I go across the grass, and I'll go up to the karaoke patimoka room. And I go down those steps, and I'll go across, cut through the coffee shop, and I'll be here. And I made it to the karaoke patimoka room, and then that bit of walkway from the karaoke patimoka room to the coffee shop, I didn't realize how slippery it was. And then whee, boom, so I was down. That's the foreground. The foreground is having a great idea, which doesn't quite work out the way you want it to. And Luangpor Chah would talk a lot about the worldly dharmas. Like the foreground is accidents and learning from accidents. The foreground is making decisions which have unintended consequences. The foreground is success and failure, is disappointment and betrayal, is loyalty and friendship. It's all of that. And we have no choice but to live in the foreground and do our best. So I will now wear my sandals and behave myself and try not to fall. But to think that you could have a life without accident is not Dhamma. To think that you could have a life without betrayal is not Dhamma. To think that you could have a life without making mistakes is not Dhamma. And sometimes we think wrongly that, well, if only I hadn't done this or I hadn't done that, then things would somehow work out. But everyone has accidents. Everyone makes choices which have unintended consequences, maybe not so good. Everyone, the Buddha got betrayed by his cousin, Devadatta. Devadatta tried to kill him, right? Has your cousin ever tried to kill you? So, huh? Not yet. Not yet. Well, I hope. So this is the idea that we live in samsara, and we do our very, very best to do our best. But this kind of expectation that samsara somehow, if we just make the right decisions, it'll be perfect, that's not Dhamma. And that's why I think the Force tradition so much stresses that there is old age, sickness, and death, not as a negation of the beauty of life or the successes that we can have in life, but to realize that the foreground has its limitations. Do your best, but there will be decisions and accidents, and you learn from them. You do your very, very best. So the way I like to think of practice is again, I hope I'm not overusing this foreground, background analogy, but there you go, give it a go. That I'm practicing awakened consciousness with the way things are. So awakened consciousness with accidents, rather than thinking that somehow my life could be perfect and I'll never have an accident. And when I have an accident, I think, well, I get this, make it a problem or something like that. Or mindfulness with disappointment, awakened consciousness with success, with failure. And so then the worldly dhammas are coming and going, but they are not my refuge. It's the awakened mind that is my refuge. So using this preposition with, I find quite helpful. So I thought we could do some anapanasati today. And the reason I haven't introduced it earlier, because I wanted to get this idea across of practicing with something, because it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be like this morning, I thought the sound of the rain was wonderful because it was so noisy that I could notice the stillness of the mind very easily. And so practicing with the sound of rain, or practicing with the sound of silence or whatever you want. And that way of practicing is that you're not looking for an experience. This is very, very important. The experiences can, like in meditation, you can have gorgeous experiences, but if they change, that cannot be the goal. It cannot be the unconditioned. So if you have a fabulous meditation, great. Fabulous meditation feels like this. And if it changes, is that a problem? Only if you have desire for experience. Where is the problem? Is the problem that I am not having my fabulous meditation I had last year or last week? Is that the problem? Or is it the desire to repeat and have that same thing again and again? So that's why we focus on that's why it's an education around tanha, rather than always having attainments or levels of joy that we might have. And this sense of silent knowing, stillness, this language I find very helpful to put into the mind, things like stillness. You're just seeding into consciousness a possible way or a reference, say, a verbal reference to how you might pay attention. I find that way of using language very, very helpful. So, like this morning, I was just, after feeling embarrassed and falling down and making a mess of it, but then I was just listening to sound and just contemplating what's changing and what's unchanging. And that kind of contemplation brings you to a kind of Dhamma Vijaya, a questioning of life which isn't intellectual. And that's a really good way of focusing. So I just listen, and what's still and what's moving. And then I emphasize the stillness, obviously. And the thing is, all experience points to stillness. You cannot have movement if you did not have stillness of knowing. You couldn't have it. I couldn't know the sound, the moving sound of the rain if there was not the still knowing of that. And so pain always points to stillness. Joy always points to stillness. This is the irony. But the desire mind tries to, well, the desire mind is working the other way. It's looking out into experience, trying to find the perfection of experience, joy or whatever. And we need to do that. And that always brings us back to Luangpor Dun's famous rephrasing of Four Noble Truths. The mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. So when I'm like listening to, again, I as you know, I like to use listening. I'm just listening to the rain. Then if I'm paying attention, then the mind knowing the mind is that silence, But it's the same as like my shoulders kind of not in good shape right now because I fell on this arm, so it's kind of painful, not bad. But I can, like, that really hurts. But if I just stay with the pain, there's the stillness of knowing. I'm not going to dig too long because that would be masochistic, right? So even with pain, chronic pain, people have asked me about chronic pain, you can do that. You can see where's non-pain within pain. Because to know pain, there must be something which is not pain. You see what I mean, huh? And if you get that principle and you use that preposition of with, practicing with pain, then you're not trying to conquer pain. Now, I need to do something about pain, so I'll make sure I do exercises and take all kinds of interesting ibuprofens and things like that. So you still take care of the body's needs. You're not dismissing that. But that's samsara. And samsara is limited. We have to function within it. But what is not samsara? What is not samsara? What is not pain? So like when you like say if I feel anger, I'm not an angry guy, but if I feel anger about something, and I have enough mindfulness, and this is the difficulty, to say, well, what is not anger? That takes a lot of mindfulness, but the knowing is not angry. Knowing knows anger. So even anger points back to silent witnessing. If you're very judgmental, or if you believe in the anger, then you're lost in samsara. So let's say I get angry at the floor tiles because they're slippery or something like that, right? Then I'm caught in samsara. And then if I hate myself for being angry, I'm caught in samsara because I'm identifying with the foreground. Having dealt with the foreground, what is it that knows anger? And that which knows anger is not anger. So I'm not even trying to be a good person that never has anger. That's a very dangerous, insidious, difficult ideal that we have as good people, because we are good people. You know, we're not robbing banks, and we're trying to be kind to each other, and we're actually living together, 50 of us together, without getting into fights, I hope. Luangpor would tell me if there was. So we're actually very, very good people, and we're doing good things, and we're trying our very, very best. But no person is perfect. Like Luangpor Sumedho is not perfect as a personality. So if we're trying to find perfection on the emotional level, on that level, then we attach to idealism, and then we hate ourselves, which is you're still in the foreground. That's not the escape. So, like if I make an error in judgment, or I say something which is awful, whatever, then I feel the results of that and try to live, try to be a better person. But I realize that the only place you find perfection is in awareness is perfect. But emotions are not perfect. The body is imperfect. Social situations are perfect. Sangha is imperfect. Human beings are imperfect. So you take it, that's it. It's imperfect. But what is perfection then? Well, perfection is knowing the way things are, which is not fixed, because the way things are always moving. So if I know disappointment is disappointment, and then we come back to that Pinyang Niang again and again, I'm always moving towards the silence of the mind. Luangpor Chah would teach a lot of praise and blame. How do you say worldly dharmas in Thai? Lokatam. So I think all the Kubajans teach that a lot. And like this example of falling, that's just accident, right? Then someone could come and give me a lecture. Bhante, if you were more mindful, and I'd say, shut up. Leave me alone. So you get that kind of, all right. Preaching at you. As if you could never have an accident, as if accidents never happen. And so once you see samsara as imperfect, you're actually better at being in samsara, aren't you? You don't expect much from it, but you're actually probably much more efficient at it. There was a famous American, one of my favorite American historians, Barbara Tuchman. She died some years ago. And I guess her most famous book is Guns of August. But she wrote about war and warriors and leaders who start wars. Very, very good historian. But she has this phrase I often think about: the conceit of a happy plan. Can you translate that in Thai? The conceit of a happy plan. It's going to be happy. My plan is going to work. Wow. The idea being, maybe I'll expand a bit. The idea being that so who was it? Who was the king of Austria then in the First World War? Bismarck was who was it? Anyway, the warriors that started the First World War had an idea. yeah, we'll start a war and we'll win. Or let Putin say, Putin says, yeah, we'll invade the Ukraine. We'll win in 2 weeks and I'll be great. This is the conceit of a happy plan. You know, they, oh, this will really, really be great. Whereas Luangpor Chah would say, my nay, it's unsure, it's unsure, it's unsure. So that our happiness is not grounded in the worldly dharmas. And yet we can make worldly dharmas happy. We can care for each other. We can be moral. We can be creative. We can do all of that. But ultimately, it's not perfect. No way you can make it perfect. And if you know that, then it's okay. And then you do your best. But then, what is there perfection? And I would say awareness. Yeah, awareness is perfect. It has because it has no color. You know how does awareness have a smell? No, awareness knows smell. Right? Does awareness have gender? No. Is awareness pink? It has no color. You know the name of our kitchen steward in Tisarana? We give him the name Nirasso. He was the main cook, and Nirasso means tasteless. Now, why would you give your cook the name tasteless? Why would you do that to him? He loves it because Nibbana has no taste. Awareness has no taste. It's nirasso. It's tasteless. So and so I could taste salty or I could taste sweet. They change. What's unchanging is the still knowing. All phenomena, all conditions, all created things point back to the uncreated. That's the irony of it. But Luangpor Dun's, the mind going outside, is the cause. So as long as I'm going outside into samsara to seek my fulfillment, it'll come and it'll go. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. But the mind knowing the mind is the stillness of knowing, and that's the liberation from suffering, and that's the path. So be careful. Don't fall down. But if you fall down, don't if someone falls down, don't give them a lecture. Be kind to them and so on and so forth. So let's do some, I'll maybe we just do some anapanasati, but keep in mind now this idea of awareness with the way things are, not conquering, not figuring them out, and really move away from, if you can, analytical discursive thinking. Don't try to figure this out. Just be the knowing, trust and awareness, see what happens. And don't try to get rid of thought either. I'm not saying that, but just try not to go there. So let's stretch your legs a bit and we'll sit. I'll sit from up here. Let's begin with listening, as I like to do. So listening to the way things are. Try this inquiry. What? In terms of sound, notice the changing nature of sound. And then the unchanging nature of awareness. Now, you can't find awareness as a thing, an object, so you can only be aware. So you might say, be that stillness, be that still knowing. So notice change. And what's unchanging. So now I'm practicing still knowing, still awareness with changing sound. Now feel the breathing of the body. Feel how the breathing affects the sensations in the body. So this isn't conceptual, it's feeling the body changing with the breath. What's changing in the breathing? And what's unchanging? The still knowing. So this is awareness with breathing. Now take an out breath. Still knowing with the changing nature of an out breath. And it changes to in breath. Still knowing with the changing nature of an in breath. Now, when you do that, do your eyes tighten? Do you try to see the breath, as it were? That's not necessary. So the attention is receptive, receiving one in breath, letting go with an out breath. Awareness with one whole in breath, awareness with one whole out breath. And then when you kidnap my thoughts, then return to still knowing. You might just use the word thinking, and after the word register still knowing. It's like this. And then pick up the breath again. Just be very patient. Now, I'll just allow that pattern to take care of itself. All right, so let's just sit quietly and do awareness with breathing. first interviews, right? So carry on, others sitting, walking, lying down. So still knowing with walking, right? So if you're, or just eating, say, when I started meditation, I try to concentrate on eating and not think. Horrible, horrible way to ruin a nice meal. It really was. Or I'd count my number of chews. Horrible. One, one spoon. That's all control. That's not mindfulness. Whereas mindfulness with eating is you're eating and you're trying to just be with the stillness, liking, disliking, being distracted, dropping your pizza on the floor, whatever's going on. But just so it's a very open kind of thing. And then you get kidnapped. And then again, as I said earlier, that point where you notice that you've been thinking, what do you do? What is your intention there? What kind of effort do you make? Is it one of saying, awareness is like this? Or is it a judgment? God, I'm thinking again, I'm hopeless. If it's that, you create another sense of self. And that sense of self is avijja. I am a thinker. I'm a terrible thinker. I think too much. I have a thinking problem, which is just more papancha and more. Whereas, awareness is like this, you're home. That might not sound like much, but it's the difference between heaven and hell, or I don't know, enlightenment and delusion. So take those. So make an intention in your meditation to really see what does your mind do when you notice that there's thinking going on, rather than try to meditate without thinking. Thinking is natural; it comes and goes. It's a different intention. If you set up your meditation, walking or sitting, I'm not going to think, you won't be successful because that's not Dhamma. Dhamma doesn't work that way. But if you begin to see that thought is an object that comes and goes and the stillness of knowing is always there, presence is never absent, then you've got it right. And that insight comes around the very point of knowing that you're there. Knowing that you're there. Okay? So then for those on the first interview, we'll see you at 10 o'clock. So sitting, walking, carry on. Don't fall.